you ready to learn? So in the absence of a podcast guest today, I wanted to try a new segment called Ask Irvo. Hashtag Ask Irvo. This is Irvo, Matthew Irving. He's the manager of Waterpro and the guy who covers my gaps, which are big. So I've gone through and written a list of commonly asked irrigation questions that come up on social media and in our shop, and I thought we could put together some audio around that so that you can, I guess it gives us something to reference back to for clients if they want to just cover all the FAQs. So first cab off the rank, Matt, what is the difference between brown, lilac and black polypipe?
Okay, so your brown polypipe is normally designed for your garden beds, just to blend in and hide. It's normally used for your drip tubes. Your lilac can be used for distribution and for drip tube, indicates a recycled water. And black is what they use for distribution of water to go to the drip tube.
Was there a reason that it was black? Is it just because it's carbon or it just hides or it's cheap? Or
I think it's probably... My guess is it's from the recycled plastics that it's made from. It's most black plastics is where it ends up, I would assume. So yeah.
Because the brown and the lilac pipes are actually, majority of the time, they're black inside anyway, and they're just co-extruded with a colour, aren't they?
Yeah, put a skin on them on the top of it when they're extruding it. Yeah.
Cool. Do you have to put an MP rotator on a Hunter body, or do they fit other brands?
No, an MP rotator will fit onto, providing it's the female threaded nozzle, which is what 99% of people are using, will fit onto both the Hunter PSUs and their Pro Sprays, as well as the Rainbird 1800 series or a Toro SLP body. But as long as they've got that micro thread,
do you know what that's called?
The actual type of thread?
Yeah.
No,
I don't either.
No.
So a hardware shop body, if you really wanted to go down that path.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we stock and sell Rainbird and Hunter because of their seals and their warranties, and you're about the same price as what a hardware shop sprinkler body's going to be as well. So
those bodies come in different heights. Obviously, we stock a 2-inch, a 3-inch, a 4-inch, a 6-inch, and a 12-inch, I think. Is there a size that I should be using if I'm putting them in my lawn? Oh... Everyone gets a carton.
That's a carton.
Hang on. Hey, I'm just answered your phone accidentally. I'm just doing a podcast at the moment. How are you? I'll call you back in 10 or 15 minutes. See you, mate. Ooh.
That's not going to cost you.
That's awkward.
Yeah, so a 2-inch...
Imagine it was a real guest.
Yeah, that's right. A 2-inch body is obviously represents the pop-up height.
Okay, so not the size of
when we reference 2, 3, 4, it's actually the pop-up height, not the size of the body.
Yep.
So normally a 2-inch body is actually a 4-inch. A 2-inch pop-up is a 4-inch canister.
So that could be easily confused for a beginner.
Correct. So when we reference a 2-inch or a 3-inch body, that means the actual pop-up height. Traditionally, 2 inches are used for people because it's a shallower trench. It's a lot easier to use. However, for a lot of the common grasses that are, I guess, being put into lawns at the moment, being kikuyus and buffaloes, they're a lot higher.
The grass grows a lot higher.
Yeah, and then obviously from a landscaper putting it in, there's that, I guess, allowance for the homeowner to not mow, I guess, once or twice a week. They might not mow for a fortnight, so it gets high. So by putting a 3 or a 4-inch, you've got a pop-up height that can clear that grass and allow a little bit of leeway between mows. Whereas if it's got longer and you've only got a 2-inch, that MP rotator nozzle that we're putting on top of it, for example, would be hitting the grass and not reaching the distance that it needs to.
If the grass grew thick enough that it was not helping a 3-inch or a 4-inch pop-up, what would you do? Would there be a fitting that you'd install to raise that sprinkler?
Yeah, so... Obviously, you've already put the pipework in, so your pipework's fixed underground. So if you didn't want to obviously dig down and actually fix that, you can buy risers for the stems, which are another 150 mil. The downside is that's the stem sitting fragile, completely up above the ground, which is not hidden inside that canister from a protection.
But it's the easiest way to do it.
It's the easiest way to do it. Yep. Otherwise, dig down below your sprinkler, taper that pipe work back down to a deeper level, and then put your 3 or your 4 or your 6 inch body, the pop-up height that you think you need, and away you go.
Or you could use an adapter or something like a...
Yeah, you can use like a male-female adapters, which give you like a 15 or a 20 mil increase if you needed to, which happens over years where thatch build-ups and top dressing events and what have you.
What size polypipe should I use for an irrigation system in my backyard? So if I've got a normal, say, 600 square metre block, should I be using a certain size pipe for my sprinkler system, and why?
You should be using, I guess, traditionally, the 19 mil polypipe is what we would use. I guess a common misunderstanding is the 13 mil gives you an increase in pressure. It's not the case. It's what you're actually creating is a higher velocity in water, which is what water hammer is. So you want to be basically putting in a 19 mil or a 25 mil. That's flow rate dependent. A lot of the time for the average home, a 19 mil polypipe for the sprinklers that suit a sort of, I guess, a 6x4, 6x5 sort of back lawn would be fine for a 19 mil poly. But the 25 might be needed if you've got, I guess, those big front lawns where you've got some gear-driven sprinklers where there's a bit more flow rate. Obviously, we can do the calculations for you as far as what size poly would be needed.
So if it was 30 or 40 litres a minute, 19 mil is fine.
Yeah, once you sort of get up to anything from over 30 litres a minute, I like to use 25 mil. Just a bit of an insurance for the minimal cost increase. You give, I guess, ensuring that you're giving your sprinklers as much pressure that you can.
When you do an irrigation design, obviously people talk about head-to-head. Can you explain what that means and why it's done?
Yeah, so a sprinkler traditionally has been designed to basically with the intent of what you throw out, you have to throw back, meaning that it's going to water heavier at its head, and the water on a lawn, for example, would be lighter. If you were throwing from one side, you're heavier at the sprinkler, and then you're drier out from the sprinkler.
Okay.
So then by putting a sprinkler on the opposite side, you're creating an equal uniformity of water, which allows, I guess, from a growth point of view, an even level of growth on your grass as well.
And is that's in traditional gear drives? Is that something that doesn't exist as much now with an MP rotator, or is that...
MP rotators still require
head-to-head?
Some of their strip series, however, allows a triangular setup because they're designed to, I guess, the way that the technology's been in the nozzle, that it will water heavier further away as well, and it's more of a consistent stream with that design intent. So you're not obviously putting ridiculous amounts of sprinklers for like small medium strips and that sort of stuff.
So when you say triangular, if we were to water a rectangle that was, say, 3 metres by 6 metres, you would have 6 sprinklers doing that, 2 at each end and then 2 in the middle of each of the long sides?
Correct.
If that was a side strip style rectangle, you could have one in a corner and then you cross to the other side and have it in the centre and then cross back to the other side. And
that's correct.
In the other corner. Okay, that might not be as easy to understand from an audio point of view, but
providing you can reach the other side, then that nozzle technology has been designed for that.
Okay. So obviously you've talked about that matched precipitation or the head-to-head being important from an irrigation point of view. If that's on a lawn, how long should people be watering their lawns for?
Based from the MP rotator?
Well, I guess if you want to explain it in
water
millimetres per period and explain why one is more than the other.
Okay, so the majority of, I guess, Adelaide's lawns are going to be a warm season grass, being a kikuyu or a cooch. They require around, for a nice lush lawn, is about 1 inch of water or 25 mil of water per week in the peak of summer, like a good average January.
So it's 30 to 35 or more like 28 to 33 degrees Celsius?
Correct. Yep. Just our average summers. When you get heat waves, obviously, then you've got percentage adjustments that need to become part of that. But we want to be applying that 25 mil a week. Now, an MP rotator system for an average backyard, if designed on a head-to-head, is going to be applying something around 12 to 15 mil an hour.
Yep. Obviously, then those nozzles vary slightly, but if you, all 1000s and 2000s.
If you match all those up, they match precipitation, so you'd be applying around that mark. And then based on that, you'd be looking at, I guess, that 2 hour.
So if it's 12, it's 2 hours for 25 mil. Do you need to take into consideration evaporation as well, or that's 25 mil in addition to evaporation? Like
that's based on
covering enough to cover evaporation.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. And if you were using a Rainbird 5000 or a pro spray, not like a spray nozzle that's just, imagine. Okay, for example, if someone went into a hardware shop and bought spray nozzles, what are they, like 20 or 25 mil an hour? They
go to from 20 to 30 mil an hour on a lot of sprays. So traditionally, people were used to putting, from when we've come from 15 years ago, which was all sprays, that 10 minutes of watering and you've almost got water running down your path because it's going on so quick.
Because it's put on 6 or 8 mil in 10 minutes.
That's right.
Or whatever it is.
And then we've got an Adelaide, a lot of houses on Adelaide are based on that Babisco soil, heavy clays. You've got nowhere to go, so it's going to have a lot of runoff.
They would be watering, say, 3 or 4 times a week for 10, 12, 15 minutes kind of thing.
Correct, yeah. Okay. And then, so obviously that's one thing to keep in mind when we do go to the new MP rotator is you've got a more efficient way of watering, but you need to have that on for longer to be able to get that water into the soil profile.
Is winterizing an irrigation system necessary in Australia?
Not from an ice point of view. Yep. Obviously, some selected states have that issue. I know Hobart have, and some of the areas in Canberra do a bit of some winterization of
what
some
does that
irrigation
mean? Like
systems.
that, and these obviously I've grabbed some questions off social media. So, as in if the water is in the pipes, that the pipes when they freeze they'll break. That's the theory behind it. So obviously in Canada or the US or like regions that are, or Russia, we've got a guest that listens to this in Russia. He hasn't commented. She hasn't commented. That's to stop breakages from ice expansion. Is that what it is?
Correct. Yep. Yeah. Yep. So they basically traditionally what they do is they bleed the lines completely, and then so they're free of water, and then that allows minimal ice build up inside your system, and you turn your valves on and clear them out as well. I guess from a golf point of view in a sports fields, what we see a bit in winter is that syringe irrigations in winter, and that's more for the plant more so than the irrigation system, and that's just a case of putting water on small amounts of time throughout a cold night because of that dew that builds up. We don't want that dew sitting on the leaf for too long and then burning.
So that's from a turf protection point of view more than an irrigation protection point of view.
Yeah, that's right. So then they wet that dew off, which, because the water flowing is obviously melted, it's not ice, so it's going to wash that ice build up off the leaf, and then you don't get that burn on as much on your grass.
So it might seem odd to be watering when it's 0 degrees or 4 degrees or 2 degrees.
Yeah, but they might only have it on for 30 seconds to a minute just to wet the leaf, and then it basically washes that ice down.
That's similar to that, putting fans in low areas in vineyards to get rid of that frost, I guess.
Correct.
What is the best fertiliser to use for lawn? That's a pretty big question.
Yeah.
So, do you have a I guess a recommended cycle around organic versus chemical, and obviously keeping in mind this is a question that we get asked in the building, and Matt's not an agronomist, so this is just one man's opinion.
Yeah, I guess I like to see organic fertilizers that create microorganisms naturally within the soil profile. You end up with from what my understanding is you end up with less salt buildups into the back lawns, especially when I guess people are becoming more fanatical about their lawn. They're wanting to...
It wants to be emerald green every day. And
that's right. So they're applying fertilizers not just once a season now. It's actually... They're following the labels and actually putting it on quite regularly because they want to keep feeding it. If you're feeding that with a heavily artificial fertilizer, you can end up with salt build-ups in your lawns, in which case you need to then put big irrigation events on to actually try and flush that through the profile.
Which is going to go into the ground eventually anyway.
Correct.
I'm guessing back to the water table.
Back into the water tables, yeah. From what I feel is the best type of fertilizer, your general NPKs that are set up for lawn specifics.
Like
slow release sort
granular.
of stuff with a, I guess, good nitrogen and potassium and phosphorus. We want to make sure that we've got a good blend of those, because you're also feeding the lawn as well as helping it get green and create, I guess, vigorous growth. Some of the heavy greening specific are just a high nitrogen, like basically urea.
It's like a steroid more than a...
That's right. And so it all...
genuine growth.
Yeah, you'll get a great result if you had a big party coming up and you knew in 2 weeks and you wanted to make the lawn look great, then go ahead and put a greening fertiliser on. It's not a great long-term thing. It's just it's like getting shredded for stereos.
Yeah, that's it. You got to maintain it.
Yeah.
I think it might be good actually for us to get a guest on to talk about fertiliser in more depth. I'll look into that because there's some pretty intelligent agronomists. I think that, I don't even know if that's the right word, but people that know about
a bit more soil science understanding.
Soil science guys. Yeah. A lot of times you'll find I just say words I don't really know what they mean. Sound confident enough. People don't ask any questions. What have we got here? What's the best online application for designing my own irrigation system? I don't know of any that I could recommend. I don't know what your thoughts are around. It's probably such a hard thing to because every area is so different. If it was a simple area, it's easy, but
so an online application from an irrigation design point of view.
Like if someone wanted to just go onto www.designmyown.system.com.au and put their area in, is there a program to your knowledge that's good enough that it would be better than using a professional irrigation shop, or the same?
Not really from what I've seen on the market. The problem there's been a few that have come and gone. I think...
Because I reckon PPI made one.
Yeah.
They had something.
The problem I've seen with some of them is their own brand driven. So
they're not independent.
If you wanted to trial whether an MP rotator works well in your lawn or a Rainbird Arvan nozzle's more suited, you haven't really got that luxury with
I guess you'd have to go to the Rainbird one, and then you'd have to go to the Hunter one, and then deduce your own results. I
guess you've got design guides that are open to the general public from a resource centre on the Hunter and Rainbird websites.
They're pretty detailed, aren't they?
They are, and they're more driven around a commercial an installer point of view.
Yep.
So I guess that's where we come into our own. So,
and that's, I guess, it doesn't matter if it's Waterpro or not, but most irrigation shops in Australia, and probably... Actually, I had a guy comment on Facebook the other day that I think he was in northeast Queensland, and they charged $100 for an irrigation design regardless. That's just a paid service. So I'm not sure that the free design thing exists everywhere. I think most shops do it. So there's no real necessity to have that software right now, unless you're wanted to prepare your own materials list and then shop that around. But yeah. What is it? Best online application? Should I design my irrigation, my system myself, or should I get an irrigation supplier to do the design? I think we've answered that. Is it a good idea to use inline fertiliser injection for my irrigation system?
It has a pro.
From a sprinkler or drip point of view. So can you run fertiliser injection through sprinklers?
Yes. Yep. So you can have dosing systems that from a liquid fertiliser that will inject into the water stream, and then go through the sprinklers.
Yep.
I guess that's got to be as efficient as what your sprinkler system is.
Yep.
So if we're talking from the start, we were talking about that. It's what you throw out, you have to throw back. If you only had sprinklers on one side, then expect that you're going to have more of a heavier dose of fertiliser near your sprinklers, and not as much on the other side. The other part of it is from a SA water containment or any water authority's containment. You've got chemicals now going into your drinking water supply, so you need to have protection on that to stop that potential backflow.
Do you think that would be a medium hazard, wouldn't it?
Yes.
It wouldn't be RPZ, it would be...
No, it's RPZ.
It's RPZ.
Yeah,
so
it's high hazard, yeah.
There's low, medium and high hazard backflow prevention.
Yeah. Because you're directly injecting into the water stream, it's an RPZ required.
Whereas only one? It would be, wouldn't it?
You'd need to protect... There'd be an RPZ protection from the irrigation system.
Yep.
Then if you had other things happening beyond that, then you'd have dual checks or double checks.
Because obviously when
situation.
Treflan was being used, there was a lot of argument that 2 RPZs were required in South Australia. I'm not sure what it's like in every other state. Be interested if anyone is, I guess, able to comment in below whatever platform this is on. If you had RPZs, if you only had to have 1 or 2. So RPZ stands for Reduced Pressure Zone.
Correct.
And it's the highest level backflow prevention available to man.
Yeah.
Effectively.
That's right, yeah.
Or woman to people.
Without having a physical disconnection.
Yeah. Yep. So without having a rainwater tank that fills up, and you pump that water, and that's
just a mix, and you bucket the water on into the tank or whatever you do. So, then you've obviously got fertilisers. That next lower hazard is obviously fertilisers potentially, I guess, once they've become mixed in with the water. I guess from a granular point of view, if you chicken fed the fertiliser out and then watered that can potentially come back into the sprinklers and run back down the line.
If you want to be really,
So that's when we use dual checks and things like that.
Yep.
So,
the minimum backflow prevention for any irrigation systems are dual check.
Dual check, or coming off of a tap, we'd obviously go down to a vacuum breaker point of view as well.
So a vacuum breaker, for anyone that hasn't seen it, it's basically a brass thread that you screw onto your tap, and it's got a little rubber flap inside it on a spring that the water pushes down when the water turns on, but when you turn the water off, the spring pulls the rubber back up to stop anything going back into the drinking supply. Obviously, a dual check's then 2 spring-loaded pieces of plastic inside a brass cylinder, and then a double check. Did I say dual check? Yeah,
yep.
Dual check. And then a double check is a testable version of that.
Correct. It's just got a different actuation in the way the valves work. A bit more of a positive spring against that as well.
And you can then have someone come out and go, yes, it's working. So government, schools.
Whereas that RPZ was being a reduced pressure zone, you got a pressure difference between the 2 valves, backflow valves, that's in the one unit. And then if there is an event of backflow, it creates an air gap and it actually purges back to the ground and then creates an airlock between, so you can't get water back into the mainstream.
So that's why they had to be installed above ground.
Correct.
So that when they dumped water, they weren't sitting in the water, they just dumped.
That's how they can test and check that the pressures are different across them. So,
I have an old Rainbird irrigation controller. What is the best way to upgrade it to be controlled by my phone?
You have an old irrigation
Rainbird controller. So let's make it that more specific to answer. I have a Rainbird irrigation controller that's not Wi-Fi compatible. So you're buying a new controller.
If it's a Rainbird ESP ME control, made November 2016 onwards, we can install a Wi-Fi link module to it.
And a faceplate. The link module just works, doesn't it?
Correct. So we can put the link module into those and then download the app either on the Apple Play Store. Is it? Or the
I don't know. Is anyone still using Apple?
Yeah.
The App Store?
Apple's done. So
yeah. I reckon Apple's done anyway, isn't it? No one's using them anymore.
And then obviously Android Play Store. So
Google Play.
Download the Rainbird app and away you go.
And you can have that app on your phone or an iPad or a PC, I'm guessing.
No PC. It's all,
no PC.
It's app driven. So unless you had an emulator to run.
Yep.
But
why would you?
Everyone's got their phones. So that's obviously if you had an ESP ME. If you've got any other Rainbird controllers, if you had an ESP ME prior to November 2016, you can get hold of a updated faceplate and then buy that Wi-Fi dongle, and I guess same result.
And that's, I think, from rough memory, that's about a $250 process with us, and I'd say that'd be about the market rate to buy a faceplate and a dongle. Yeah, roughly.
Yep. If you had any other Rainbird controller, unless it's again that November, or probably be even newer now. I think it was
all the RZXs were made after that anyway, weren't they?
RZX-E is a Wi-Fi enabled. Anything that's RZX is not. And then anything beyond that is a case of come see us or someone else regarding a Wi-Fi enabled controller. And we can go from there.
If someone rings you up and they're having troubles with their Wi-Fi irrigation controller, what's the most common problem?
We've had some communication questions as far as the phone's not being able to talk to the Wi-Fi controller. what we've seen that be, I guess the biggest problem for that has been there's been changes to the person's Wi-Fi router.
Yep.
Obviously, the controller and the phone app is driven and controlled by Rainbird, whereas the one thing that they can't control is your own Wi-Fi settings. So a lot of the time we found out, we've had a gentleman come in and he can't access his controller anymore, and he said he's done nothing at all, but then he finds out his wife's changed the Wi-Fi password on him, or has pressed the button on the actual router that's actually disabled Wi-Fi. So there's, I guess...
Or your house guests turn the PowerPoint off to your controller.
Yeah, exactly right. So
that one's very close to home. That happened to Matt.
Yeah. So we had no power to my laundry, which means I couldn't communicate. So you still need power to your controller. Yeah. So
and your chest freezer?
And my chest freezer, nice and defrosted with 5 kilo of prawns. So.
But these guys were nice enough to look after his house. So
yeah.
Cool. So it's important to have a Wi-Fi signal for a Wi-Fi controller. I know that sounds really like common sense, but that seems to be the most common thing. That people are putting their controllers in their sheds or a distance away from their Wi-Fi. Anyone who doesn't have, an intermediate understanding of Wi-Fi, you can get a booster for that. So you can have your router and then have a booster and then have your controller, and it boosts the signal. So
yeah, we can basically have boosters, or you can set up mesh networks as well, which give you, I guess, an umbrella or a mesh, as they call it, of Wi-Fi access throughout your whole house, and can push that out to like a shed out the back of the house.
Which is pretty DIY-ish now. Like, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but you can buy a Netgear booster or a mesh network on the internet.
And they're very plug and play,
and
away
you
go.
Do YouTube video how to do it. And
yep. I guess one thing to be mindful of is Wi-Fi gets often put into the same basket as Bluetooth.
Yeah, and people say, I've got
a Bluetooth tap timer, and I go to the Greek islands and I can't access it. Well, it's range, it's in line of sight, obviously within a Bluetooth range, whereas Wi-Fi is using a communication method, obviously over the internet. So
and Bluetooth, maybe 20 or 30 meters, general Bluetooth.
Yeah, depending on the unit that you're buying. So yeah,
things in the way.
Yep.
Can I turn my garden lighting on using my irrigation controller?
Okay, so in short, yes, you can.
Yep.
You do need some extra hardware. So the actual controller itself can't operate the lights or power the lights, but however, it can be used to switch a relay on.
Yep.
So we can run your driver or your transformer for your lights through a 240 volt and 24 volt relay, which is then switched from your irrigation controller. So if you had a 6-station irrigation controller and you're only using 5 stations, you can use that 6th station on the controller and wire that into this relay, set your own program on it, which, for example, you wanted to run, you've got people over that you want 8 o'clock at night till midnight before you go to bed, your lights come on. It's like never setting up an irrigation program. You just set up your times. When that station kicks on, it actually energizes the relay and allows power through the relay to those lights.
But it becomes a station.
It becomes a station.
So you can't operate your lights and your sprinklers at the same time.
Not with the traditional controllers that I guess are on the market from a residential point of view.
Yep. It's a bit of a hack, isn't it? You're kind of buying a relay and then...
Yeah, I guess in short, an irrigation controller is a clock with a series of switches that turn on and off given the time that they need to be.
Yep.
You've got that ability, if you've invested in an irrigation system and Wi-Fi, you can use that same infrastructure to now run your lights. You can have, I've had people that have used the relays and their Wi-Fi controllers to turn on fountains at the front of the house and all sorts of stuff. So
you can turn on anything 240.
Anything they want, basically. You can have it to run just a front porch light if you wanted to. So I guess we're going down that.
You might, if you're going down that path, it's a different product, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, we've got Google Home, Amazon Alexa, and HomeKit.
I think
Apple
Siri
HomeKit.
Apple are trying to come up with.
So and they're developing all of those platforms now are being developed to work with Hunter, Orbit, and Rainbird controllers.
I saw Rainbird are compatible with Alexa in the US.
Correct.
So I'm guessing that'll come here eventually.
Yeah. So and how they communicate, we haven't seen completely yet. I know the home kit's working with the Orbit Beehive.
Yep.
But
so is that working in Australia?
It's another US announcement. So
it's tough, isn't it? We just don't have the population to warrant the R&D.
I've got
or the development costs.
Our guru Jaron has HomeKit, so he'll be able to do a test for us with the.
We should actually do an Ask Jaron. That would be crazy. Some of the stuff that bloke knows.
Yeah.
So, all right, cool. If anyone wants to find out anything about irrigation or lawn, I guess they're our majority of our markets. Garden lighting as well. You can basically post it on the Waterpro page, or our trade. I guess our trade clients have the Waterpro trade community. #AskIrvo, and when we see it fit to do another audio and video for some irrigation questions, we'll at random just do these and have an Ask Irvo. So thank you very much. Matt's got a shitload of work to do, so
all good.
He didn't actually have this half an hour or whatever we've been in here for, but I think it's important to I guess address irrigation specific things for our podcast listeners, because we're an irrigation shop. So thanks, man.
No worries at all.
Back to work.
Cheers.